My 15-year-old niece chuckled. Dad says you're just kind of a person nobody would really Mississippi. She said it while unboxing the $850 tablet I paid for. Then everyone laughed. Except me. I just smiled, opened my phone, and severed everything. Credit, rent, tuition, all gone. That night, I moved out without a word, but I left one box in the living room. I-34M had always been the safety net. The backup plan. The guy who paid when everyone else came up short. For 8 years, I'd been living with my brother and his family, contributing more than my share while they treated me like a convenient ATM with legs. The tablet incident happened on a Tuesday evening. My 15-year-old niece had been dropping hints about wanting the latest model for weeks. Her grades were decent, her birthday was approaching, and despite everything, I loved that kid. So I bought it. $850. Money I'd saved from my software engineering salary while paying 60% of the household bills. She tore through the wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only teenagers can muster. Her eyes lit up when she saw the sleek device, and for a moment, I felt that familiar warmth of making someone happy. Then she looked up at me with this smirk I'd never seen before. She told me what her father had said about me, that I was the kind of person nobody would really miss. The words came out casual, almost conversational, as if she were commenting on the weather. She said it while holding the tablet I'd just given her, the screen still reflecting the living room lights. The room erupted in laughter. My brother doubled over, slapping his knee. His wife covered her mouth, trying to stifle her giggles. Even their 12-year-old son joined in, though I doubt he fully understood the joke. They thought it was hilarious, this perfect summary of how they saw me. I didn't react the way they expected. I didn't storm off or argue or demand an apology. I just smiled. A genuine smile, because in that moment, everything became crystal clear. I pulled out my phone and started typing. The first thing to go was the credit card I'd given them for emergencies. I canceled it while sitting right there on their couch, watching my niece explore her new tablet. Next was the streaming services, the grocery delivery subscriptions, the internet bill that came out of my account automatically. My brother was still chuckling when I stood up and walked to my room. He called after me, asking where I was going, if I was upset about a little joke. I told him I wasn't upset at all. I was liberated. Over the next hour, I systematically dismantled 8 years of financial entanglement. The joint checking account I'd stupidly agreed to, closed. My contribution to the mortgage payments, canceled. The car insurance policy that covered all 3 of their vehicles, terminated. My niece's college fund that I'd been contributing to monthly, frozen and redirected to my personal savings. The most satisfying moment was canceling the automatic payment for my nephew's private school tuition. $1,200 a month I'd been covering because my brother claimed they were temporarily tight on cash. That temporary situation had lasted 3 years. I worked methodically through my phone, tablet, and laptop. Every subscription, every automatic payment, every financial lifeline I'd extended over the years. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating. Precise. Methodical. They didn't notice anything at first. My brother came to my room around 10 p.m. to ask if I wanted to watch a movie with them. I told him I was busy and would catch up with them later. He assumed I was coding or working on a side project like usual. I packed everything I owned into my car that night. 8 years of belongings fit surprisingly well into a sedan and a small U-Haul trailer I'd rented online. My clothes, my tech equipment, my books, my guitar, everything that mattered to me. I left behind the furniture I'd bought for common areas, the kitchen appliances I'd upgraded, the big screen TV in the living room. Those were gifts to my old self, the person who thought family meant something different than it actually did. The last thing I did before leaving was place a small cardboard box on the living room coffee table. Inside was every receipt, every bank statement, every record of payment I'd made over the past 8 years. I'd been meticulous about keeping records, a habit that would now serve a very different purpose than I'd originally intended. At the bottom of the box was a single sheet of paper with a number written in red ink. $847,392. That was the total amount I'd contributed to their household over 8 years. Not just rent and utilities, but groceries, vacations, emergency repairs, medical bills, school supplies, birthday presents, Christmas gifts, and hundreds of other expenses I'd covered without thinking twice. Below that number, I'd written a simple note. This is what someone nobody would miss contributed to your life. Consider us even. I left at 3 a.m. while they were all asleep. No dramatic exit, no door slamming, no final confrontation. I just disappeared, exactly like someone nobody would miss should do. Update 1, 2 days later. The first call came at 6 a.m. Thursday morning. My brother's voice was panicked, asking where I was and why the internet wasn't working. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came an hour later from my sister-in-law, wondering why her credit card had been declined at the grocery store. I was sitting in my new studio apartment across town, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise through windows that were actually mine. I'd paid first and last month's rent in cash, put all utilities in my name, and felt more at peace than I had in years. My phone buzzed constantly throughout the day. Calls, texts, voicemails ranging from confused to angry to desperate. They'd discovered the box, they'd seen the receipts, and reality was setting in. The private school had called about the tuition payment. The mortgage company had questions about the automatic payment that had been scheduled and then canceled. My brother left increasingly frantic messages. First he was confused, then annoyed, then angry, and finally apologetic. He said they'd been joking, that I'd taken everything too seriously, that families should be able to tease each other. He said they needed me, that they'd figure out a way to make it work if I came back. But it was my niece's voicemail that almost broke my resolve. She was crying, saying she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, that she loved me and wanted me to come home. She'd talked to her friends about what happened, and they'd made her realize how cruel her words had been. Almost, but not quite. I'd spent 8 years being their safety net, and they'd taken it so completely for granted that they'd turned my generosity into a family joke. The person who covered their shortfalls, who ensured their children had everything they needed, who sacrificed his own dreams of homeownership and early retirement to keep their lives comfortable. I was just someone nobody would miss. Update 2, 1 week later. My sister-in-law showed up at my office on Friday afternoon. She'd somehow found out where I worked and convinced security to let her up. She looked tired, stressed, and desperate in a way I'd never seen before. She told me they were in trouble. Real trouble. Without my contributions, they couldn't cover the mortgage payment. The private school was demanding immediate payment of 3 months back tuition. Their joint account was overdrawn, and they were facing fees and penalties on multiple fronts. She apologized profusely, saying they'd taken me for granted and never realized how much I'd been contributing. She said my brother was too proud to come himself, but that he was devastated. The joke had gone too far, she said. They needed me to come back. I listened to everything she had to say, nodding at appropriate moments, asking clarifying questions about their financial situation. When she finished, I told her I appreciated her coming to talk to me directly and that I understood their predicament completely. Then I explained that I wasn't coming back, not because I was holding a grudge, but because I'd finally understood something important about our relationship. I'd been enabling them for 8 years, preventing them from taking full responsibility for their own lives. My departure wasn't punishment, it was growth opportunity. She asked what they were supposed to do about the house, about the kids' schools, about all the financial commitments they'd made assuming my support would continue indefinitely. I suggested they might want to consider downsizing, switching to public schools, or perhaps exploring ways to increase their own income rather than relying on subsidies from relatives they didn't particularly respect. She started crying then, saying it wasn't fair, that I was family and family helped each other. I agreed that family should help each other, which is exactly why I'd been contributing so much for so long. But I added that family members should also treat each other with basic respect and appreciation, something that had been notably absent from our arrangement. She left angry, telling me I was selfish and that I'd regret abandoning them when they needed me most. I watched her walk away from my office window and felt nothing but relief. Update 3, 3 weeks later. The texts from my niece started becoming more frequent. She'd gotten her friends involved, and apparently several of them had told her how messed up the whole situation was. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't understand how much I'd been doing for their family, and that she wished she could take back what she'd said. I finally called her back on a Sunday evening. She answered immediately, and I could hear the relief in her voice when she realized it was actually me. She started talking rapidly, apologizing and explaining and promising that things would be different if I came back. I let her talk for a while before gently interrupting. I told her that I loved her and that I'd always be her uncle, but that I wouldn't be returning to live with their family. I explained that her words hadn't just hurt my feelings, they'd revealed a fundamental truth about how I was perceived in their household. She said she hadn't meant it, that she was just repeating what she'd heard her parents say without thinking about it. But that's exactly what made it so revealing, I told her. When people feel comfortable making jokes about someone to that person's face, it shows how little they actually value them. I asked her about the tablet, and she admitted she'd been afraid to use it since I left because it reminded her of what happened. I told her to enjoy it, that it was a gift freely given, and gifts shouldn't come with guilt attached. But I also told her that it would likely be the last expensive present I'd be giving for a while. She asked if there was anything she could do to make things right, and I told her there was. She could learn from this experience and make sure she never took anyone's generosity for granted again. She could understand that words have consequences, even when they're meant as jokes. And she could work on building genuine relationships with people rather than just accepting what they provide. We talked for another hour, and by the end of the conversation, I felt like I was talking to a different person than the one who'd made that cruel comment 3 weeks earlier. Maybe this whole situation would teach her something valuable about empathy and appreciation. Maybe some good would come of it after all. Update 4, 2 months later. My brother finally swallowed his pride and called me directly. It had taken them 2 months to restructure their entire financial life, and the process had been brutal. They'd had to sell the house and move into a smaller rental. The kids were now in public schools, which they actually seemed to prefer, more diverse friend groups, better sports programs, less pressure. He told me they'd figured out how to live within their actual means, but it had required major lifestyle changes. His wife had gotten a part-time job, they'd sold one of their cars, and they'd eliminated most of their discretionary spending. They were managing, but barely. He said he understood why I'd left, and that he didn't blame me. He'd been thinking about the comment his daughter made, and he realized it reflected conversations they'd been having privately for years. They had started taking me for granted, treating my contributions as automatic rather than appreciative. But then he said something that surprised me. He thanked me for leaving, not just for the financial wake-up call, but for forcing them to become self-sufficient. His relationship with his wife had actually improved since they'd started tackling their financial challenges together. His kids had adapted better than expected to their new schools and seemed more grounded, less entitled. He didn't ask me to come back. Instead, he asked if we could start rebuilding our relationship on different terms. Maybe dinner once a month, holiday gatherings where everyone contributed equally, the kind of relationship brothers should have where neither person felt used or taken for granted. I told him I'd think about it. Final update, 6 months later. I'm writing this from my own apartment, which I've now furnished exactly the way I want it. The silence is golden. The freedom to make decisions without consulting anyone else is intoxicating. The money I'm saving by not subsidizing another family's lifestyle is substantial. I'm on track to buy my own house within 2 years. My relationship with my brother's family is slowly rebuilding, but on completely different terms. We meet for dinner once a month at restaurants where everyone pays their own way. I attend birthday parties and school events, but I bring reasonably priced gifts that are appropriate for an uncle rather than a surrogate parent. My niece has become thoughtful in a way that actually impresses me. She often asks about my work, my hobbies, my life outside of their family. She's learned to express gratitude genuinely rather than treating my generosity as an expectation. The cruel teenager who made that comment has been replaced by a young woman who seems to understand the value of relationships. The most interesting development is that they're all happier now. The financial stress was difficult initially, but they've discovered they actually prefer their smaller, more manageable life. My brother and his wife work together as a team rather than relying on external subsidies. The kids have more realistic expectations and seem more appreciative of what they have. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my niece hadn't made that comment. If they'd continued taking my contributions for granted indefinitely, would I have eventually burned out and left anyway? Would I have spent decades subsidizing people who saw me as a convenience rather than family? I'll never know, but I'm grateful for the clarity that moment provided. Sometimes the most painful truths are also the most liberating ones. The box I left on their coffee table is now in my closet, filled with receipts from my new independent life. Every payment I make to my own landlord, every utility bill with only my name on it, every purchase decision I make without considering anyone else's needs or expectations. These receipts tell a different story, the story of someone who learned that being needed and being valued are two completely different things, and that it's possible to be generous without being taken advantage of. I am no longer someone nobody would miss. I am someone who chose to leave, and in doing so, discovered exactly how much I'm worth.